The silence of the waiting room was broken only by the low hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak of plastic chairs as someone shifted restlessly. Maria adjusted the shawl around her shoulders, covering the scars that snaked across her left arm, marks of a childhood interrupted by a fire that took not only her home but also the trust an 8-year-old should have in the world. Now at 42, she carried these memories like involuntary tattoos, each mark telling a story of resilience that few bothered to read. She had been there for 2 hours waiting for her routine appointment at the city health center. The appointment had been scheduled 3 months prior, an eternity when living with the constant worry that something might be wrong. Maria worked as a night janitor in a commercial building downtown, saving every penny to pay for the supplementary tests that the public system couldn't provide with the necessary speed. Her fingers, calloused from years of handling cleaning products, tapped softly on the worn purse resting in her lap. The receptionist, a young woman no older than 20, answered the phone with a mechanical smile as her impeccably painted nails danced across the computer keyboard. From time to time, she glanced up at the waiting room, her gaze quickly skimming over Maria as if she were part of the furniture, present but irrelevant. There was a silent hierarchy in that place, determined not by medical urgency, but by appearances, accents, and social codes that Maria knew all too well. When the clock on the wall marked 3 hours of waiting, an elegant woman, wearing a navy blue blazer and carrying a leather handbag that cost more than Maria's monthly salary, entered the reception area. Her heels echoed on the cold floor with the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. Without even glancing at the waiting line, she went straight to the counter, her private health insurance card already in hand like a passport to a world where time held a different value. "I need to reschedule my appointment for today," she said, her sharp voice cutting through the low murmur of the room. Something urgent came up. The receptionist, who moments before had treated the other patients with bureaucratic indifference, immediately sat up straighter, her smile coming alive. "Of course, Mrs. Montgomery. I'll check for available appointments today." Maria watched the scene with the resignation of someone who had witnessed countless variations of that daily injustice. It wasn't a surprise, it wasn't new, it was just another confirmation that there were people whose time was worth more, whose needs were more urgent, whose humanity was more recognized. She adjusted her shawl again, not because of the cold, but out of the automatic reflex of becoming even more invisible. The woman in the navy blue blazer was seen in 15 minutes. Maria continued to wait. As the hours dragged on, she observed the other people in the room. An elderly woman dozed in a chair near the window, her cane resting against her knee with the familiarity of an extension of her own body. A young father gently rocked a softly crying baby, his eyes showing the weariness of sleepless nights. A teenager nervously fiddled with her phone, avoiding eye contact with anyone, perhaps there for an appointment she preferred to keep secret. They all shared the same condition. They were invisible to the eyes of a system that reduced them to numbers in a queue, cases to be processed with the cold efficiency of an assembly line. Maria felt a silent connection with each of them, a sisterhood forged in the waiting room of life, where patience became a compulsory virtue and dignity, an act of resistance. Then he arrived. Dr. David Evans wasn't the doctor Maria was waiting to see. In fact, he didn't even work at that health unit. He was the regional director of the city's health system, a 60-year-old man whose graying hair and wrinkles around his eyes told the story of decades dedicated to public medicine. He had stopped by during a routine visit to the units under his supervision, but something in the atmosphere of that waiting room caught his attention. Perhaps it was the way the receptionist immediately straightened up when she recognized him, or perhaps it was the glaring contrast between the attention given to different types of patients. Dr. Evans had begun his career in clinics in low-income neighborhoods, where he learned that true medicine resided not only in diagnoses and prescriptions, but in the ability to see the humanity in each person seeking care. He approached the reception desk with the discretion of someone who didn't want to cause a commotion. "Good afternoon," he said to the young attendant, who nearly dropped the phone upon recognizing him. "I'd like to understand how the patient flow is working today. May I see the list of patients waiting?" The visibly nervous receptionist handed him a spreadsheet with the names and arrival times. Dr. Evans ran his finger down the list, his eyes pausing on a few specific cases. "Maria Santos," he murmured softly, "arrived at 8 o'clock this morning." It's 4:30 in the afternoon now. He looked up at the waiting room, searching to identify the woman behind that name. His eyes found Maria almost instinctively. There was something about her posture, erect, but not stiff, patient but not resigned, that spoke of an inner strength forged in years of small daily battles. The scars on her arm, partially visible under the shawl, were not signs of fragility, but medals of survival. Dr. Evans recognized in her the kind of person who silently built the country, brick by brick, day by day, without expecting recognition or applause. "How long has Mrs. Maria been waiting?" he asked the receptionist, though he already knew the answer from the spreadsheet. She arrived early, but there were some emergencies, and Dr. Carter had to see some private patients who needed rescheduling, and the explanation dissolved into a tangle of increasingly flimsy justifications. Dr. David nodded, not in approval, but in understanding of the perverse system that had taken root. He knew this dynamic well: public system patients treated as second-class citizens, while those with better economic conditions received priority attention, even when there was no medical justification. Without saying anything more to the receptionist, Dr. David walked towards the waiting room. His steps were firm, but not hurried, determined but not aggressive. There was an almost ceremonial quality to the way he moved, as if he were about to perform a ritual of restoring the moral order of the world. He stopped in front of Maria, who looked up in surprise. "Mrs. Maria Santos?" he asked in a voice that carried decades of experience in transforming medical offices into sanctuaries of human dignity. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice revealing a careful upbringing that contrasted with the simplicity of her appearance. "My name is Dr. David Evans. I'm the regional director of the municipal health system, and I'd like to personally accompany you to your appointment. You've waited long enough." His words echoed through the waiting room like a declaration of war against institutionalized indifference. They weren't spoken in a loud or dramatic tone, but they carried the weight of a moral authority that made everyone present, patients, staff, and even the security guard, stop to pay attention. Maria blinked a few times, as if trying to process what was happening. "It's not necessary, doctor. I can wait." "No, Mrs. Maria, you can't wait any longer. And you shouldn't." Dr. David extended his hand to help her up, a simple gesture that carried the weight of deep recognition. She wasn't just another case to be processed, but a person deserving of respect, attention, and care. As they walked down the hallway towards the examination rooms, Dr. David made a point of walking beside Maria, not in front of her as would be expected of someone in his position. "What do you do for work?" he asked, genuinely interested. "I'm a nighttime cleaner," Maria replied, her voice still filled with surprise at the attention she was receiving. "I work in a commercial building downtown. I like what I do, leaving places clean for people to start their day well." "That's wonderful work, Doctor," David said, and there was no condescension in his words. "You take care of the city while it sleeps. It's essential work, and those who do it with dedication deserve all our respect." Those simple words made something inside Maria shift, as if a part of her that had remained shrunken for years finally found room to stretch. It was the first time in a long time that someone had recognized the value of her work, of her contribution to the world. "Doctor." David stopped in front of Dr. Carter's office and knocked on the door with the firmness of someone on an urgent mission. "Dr. Carter, I need to talk to you." The conversation that followed was brief, but transformative. Dr. David didn't shout, didn't make threats, didn't use his power to humiliate his colleague. Instead, he spoke about medical vocation, about the oath they had taken together decades ago, about the responsibility they carried to care for all people with the same dedication, regardless of their social or economic status. "Dr. Carter," he said, with a calmness that was more powerful than any outburst of anger, "Mrs. Maria Santos has been waiting for more than 8 hours to be seen. She woke up before sunrise to be here on time. She works all night cleaning offices so that other people have a decent environment to work in, and we, who swore to take care of everyone's health, left this honorable woman waiting 8 hours while we see those with private insurance." Dr. Carter, a man in his 50s who had lost his way somewhere between his initial vocation and the pressures of the system, lowered his eyes. There was no possible defense for what had happened, and he knew it. Mrs. Santos's appointment will be now, Dr. David said, and I want it to be done with all the care and attention she deserves. Every necessary exam, every important guideline, every minute of medical attention her condition requires. Maria was then led to the examination room, where she received not only the medical consultation she had waited so long for, but something far more valuable, the recognition of her dignity as a human being. Dr. Carter, visibly moved by his superior's intervention, conducted the examination with an attention that Maria had never experienced in the public health system. But the story wouldn't end there. Dr. David knew that individual gestures, however significant, wouldn't be enough to transform an entire system. That same afternoon, he called an emergency meeting with all the health unit coordinators in the region. I witnessed something today that I cannot accept as normal, he began, addressing the room full of doctors and administrators. A hard-working woman, who contributes to our society with dignity and dedication, was treated as a second-class citizen in a unit that should be a space of equal care for everyone. He told Maria's story, not to expose or humiliate anyone, but to illustrate a systemic problem that needed to be addressed. You know, it's not just about her. It's about how many Marias are in our waiting rooms every day, invisible, patient, deserving of all our respect and care. Following that meeting, concrete changes began to be implemented. Treatment protocols were revised to ensure that waiting times were respected regardless of the patient's social status. Humanization training was instituted for all staff. Monitoring systems were created to identify and correct disparities in the treatment offered to different patient profiles. Maria, of course, didn't immediately know about all these changes. For her, what mattered was that she had been seen, heard, and treated with dignity at a time when she needed it most. But the effects of that encounter with Dr. David spread through her life in ways she couldn't have imagined. A few weeks later, she received an unexpected call. It was a journalist from a local television program who had heard about the changes implemented in the health system and wanted to better understand how it all began. David had mentioned Maria's story, without revealing personal details that could expose her as an example of the need for humanization in public healthcare. "Would you like to share your experience?" the journalist asked. "We believe your story can inspire positive changes elsewhere." Maria hesitated. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. She didn't see herself as someone whose story could interest others. But something in the memory of Dr. David's gesture, in the way he had recognized her dignity, gave her the courage to accept. The interview aired in prime time, and Maria spoke with the same simplicity and authenticity that had impressed Dr. David. She didn't present herself as a victim. She didn't dramatize her situation. Instead, she talked about the importance of being seen as a person, about the value of decent work, about the need for healthcare systems that treat everyone with equal respect. And here, let me pause Maria's story to speak directly to you who are listening or reading this narrative. If stories like this touch your heart, if you believe in the importance of giving voice to those who often remain invisible in our society, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell. By doing so, you will not only receive new stories that can inspire and transform, but you also become part of a community that values human dignity in all its forms. Each new subscription is a vote of confidence in the importance of telling stories that truly matter, stories that can make a difference in the lives of real people like Maria. Furthermore, the more people follow this content, the greater our ability to reach those who most need to hear these messages of hope and transformation. Your subscription is much more than a click. It's a gesture of solidarity with all the Marias and Davids of this world, who fight daily to make our world more just and humane. The impact of the interview was surprising. People from all over the country sent messages of support to Maria, but more importantly, healthcare professionals from other regions began to implement similar changes in their own units. The story had become a catalyst for transformations that went far beyond the individual case. Dr. David, in turn, was invited to medical lectures and conferences to speak about humanization in public healthcare. But he always made a point of telling Maria's story, of acknowledging that the real lesson hadn't come from him, but from a hard-working woman who had faced indifference with dignity and patience. Months after that encounter in the waiting room, Maria received a call that would change her life once again. It was a job offer at a hospital cleaning company, but not as a regular cleaner. The company, inspired by her story, wanted to hire her as a humanization supervisor, someone who could train other employees on the importance of their work not only in maintaining cleanliness, but in the holistic care of patients. Your work has always been about caring for people, the manager explained during the interview. Now we want you to help other people understand that too. Maria accepted the offer, not only for the salary increase, but because she had finally found a place where her life experience, her sensitivity to recognizing dignity, where others saw only invisibility, was valued as a professional competency. In her new job, she developed training that went beyond cleaning techniques. She taught the employees to observe patients, to recognize signs of discomfort or need, to offer a smile or a kind word when appropriate. You are not just cleaners, she said in her instructions. You are part of the care team. Often you spend more time with patients than any other professional. This is a responsibility, but also a privilege. The results were almost immediate. Patients began to praise not only the cleanliness of the facilities, but the more welcoming and humanized environment. Employees who previously saw themselves only as performing manual tasks began to see themselves as essential professionals in the healing and care process. Dr. David, who had followed Maria's journey from afar, wasn't surprised by her success. He had always recognized in her a natural wisdom about human relationships, an intuitive ability to see and value people's dignity. What perhaps surprised him was how that chance encounter in a waiting room had triggered a series of transformations that continued to spread like ripples in a pond. The healthcare unit, where it all began, became a reference in the humanization of care. Medical and nursing students began to do internships there, not only to learn medical techniques, but to understand how truly effective medicine goes far beyond clinical procedures. During one of these visits, a young medical student asked Dr. David, "How did you always know you should treat all patients with equal dignity? Was that something you learned in medical school?" Dr. David smiled, remembering his own youth, when he thought medicine was mainly about diagnoses and treatments. "Actually," he replied, "I learned from a cleaning lady named Maria. She taught me that dignity isn't something we give people, it's something they already possess, and it's up to us to acknowledge it." Years passed since that encounter in the waiting room. Maria now coordinated humanization programs in several hospitals in the region. Dr. David had become a national reference in humanized public health management, and their story was told in medical and nursing courses as an example of how small gestures can generate great transformations. But perhaps the most beautiful legacy of this whole story came from an unexpected source. The receptionist from that day, the young woman who had initially treated Maria with indifference, sought out Dr. David months later to tell him how the experience had changed her perspective on work and people. "I hadn't realized how I was treating the patients," she admitted, visibly moved. "After that day, I started paying attention to every person who came to the reception desk. I learned that everyone has a story, everyone deserves respect, everyone is important." She had gone back to school, was studying nursing, inspired by the example of care and dignity she had witnessed. "I want to be like Mrs. Maria and Dr. David," she said. "I want to be someone who sees people for real." This personal transformation of the young receptionist illustrated something fundamental about the power of authentic gestures of recognition and dignity. They not only benefit the recipient, but also transform those who witness them, creating ever-widening circles of compassion and humanity. One afternoon, 5 years after that initial encounter, Maria was in her new office at the hospital, preparing a presentation on humanization in care, when she received an unexpected visit. It was Dr. David, who had gone to the hospital for a meeting and decided to stop by to greet her. "How's our humanization supervisor doing?" he asked, with the warm smile she had learned to associate with moments of positive transformation. "Well, doctor." "Very well," Maria replied. "Sometimes I still can't believe it all started in that waiting room." "You know, Maria," said Dr. David, sitting down across from her desk, "I've been thinking a lot about that day. For years, I thought I had done something special by recognizing your dignity, but actually, you were the one who taught me the real lesson." Maria looked at him curiously. "You showed me that dignity isn't something we give or take away from people. It already exists. What we do is choose to acknowledge it or ignore it. That day you were there, dignified, patient, strong, regardless of my recognition. I simply chose to finally see what had always been there. This reflection by Dr. David captured the deepest essence of the whole story. It wasn't about a powerful doctor saving a vulnerable patient, but about two human beings mutually recognizing each other in their complete humanity, each learning from the other about dignity, respect, and care. That afternoon, when Maria returned home, now a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, the result of her new job, she sat on her balcony and looked at the sky as it began to darken. She thought of all the people she had met along her journey, from the child who survived the fire to the respected professional she had become. She also thought of the other Marias scattered around the world, waiting in waiting rooms, working night shifts, silently caring for the infrastructure that allows society to function. Some of them were still waiting for their own Dr. David, for someone to recognize and value their dignity. Others might never find that external recognition, but they would continue to be dignified, valuable, and essential nonetheless. The true beauty of the story, Maria had understood, was not in the happy ending of her own journey, but in the multiplication of small gestures of recognition and dignity that she and Dr. David had inspired in hundreds of other people. Every healthcare professional, who now treated all patients with equal respect, every employee who had learned to value their work and recognize the importance of every person they met, every young person who had been inspired to pursue a career dedicated to caring for others, all of them were part of a legacy that would continue to grow far beyond their individual lives. That night, before going to sleep, Maria did something that had become a ritual. She wrote in her diary some reflections on the day. But this time, instead of writing about her own challenges and achievements, she wrote a letter to all the invisible people in the world, a letter that would never be sent, but which carried all the accumulated wisdom of her journey. To you who cleans offices while the city sleeps, to you who cares for the elderly in forgotten nursing homes, to you who collects garbage before dawn, to you who works in hospital kitchens, to you who provides security for commercial buildings, to you who sells products on the streets in sun and rain, know that you are seen, you are valued, you are essential. The world may not always recognize your importance, you may go unnoticed in the crowd, no one may applaud your work, but you build civilization brick by brick, gesture by gesture, day by day. Your dignity does not depend on the recognition of others. It is inherent in the simple fact of your existence and your contribution to the world, with integrity and dedication. The story of Maria and Dr. David became an urban legend in some circles, academic inspiration in others, a success story in hospital humanization programs. But perhaps its true importance lay not in official records or citations in scientific articles, but in the emotional memory of all the people who had been touched by it in some way. Years later, when Maria was a grandmother and Dr. David had retired, they still occasionally met at public health events, not as mentor and pupil, not as superior and subordinate, but as two friends united by a moment of mutual recognition that had transformed not only their lives but the lives of countless others. At their last recorded meeting, during a congress on humanization in healthcare, Dr. David asked Maria a question that summarized decades of reflection. If you could go back to that waiting room, knowing everything that would happen afterward, would you change anything? Maria thought for a long moment before answering. I wouldn't change anything that happened to me, but I would change one thing. I wish I had had the courage to talk to the other people who were waiting with me that day, to tell them that they weren't alone, that their lives had value, that they deserved to be seen and cared for with dignity. I think that's what still moves me, the certainty that there are no invisible people, only people who haven't yet been truly seen. Maria's answer perfectly encapsulated the spirit that had guided her entire journey, not passive gratitude for having been saved, but an active commitment to extending to others the recognition and dignity she herself had received. The story ends as it began, in silence, not the silence of indifference or invisibility, but the silence of contemplation, of profound gratitude, of the recognition that small gestures of humanity can echo through time and space, transforming lives in ways that may never be fully understood or measured. Maria and Dr. David discovered that you don't have to be a hero to change the world. It's enough to be human, completely, authentically, courageously human. It's enough to recognize the humanity in another and offer them what we all deserve: dignity, respect, and the certainty that our existence matters. And so, in waiting rooms scattered across the world, in hospital corridors, in late-night offices, in public squares, everywhere people meet, this story continues to be rewritten. Every time someone chooses to truly see another person, every time someone offers dignity where there was indifference, every time someone recognizes value where others see only invisibility, the story of Maria and Dr. David gains a new chapter. Because in the end, perhaps this is the most beautiful of truths, that we all have the power to be both Maria and Dr. David at different moments in our lives. We can all be those who wait with dignity and those who recognize that dignity. We can all be transformed and transform. We can all choose to see, truly see, the people around us. And in that simple, everyday choice resides all the hope in the world.